Just finished up here. One of the most epic games on Ancients that I think I have ever played in my entire life. This is Barbarians at the Gates. You saw me play this for the first time at GMT Warehouse Weekend. Finally got it to the table after a couple false starts with a friend of mine. We played the entire 11-turn campaign, including the the Sons of Constantine Civil War, the A and B turns. We just wrapped it up. And I was the Barbarian player. My opponent was the Roman player. And this game is incredible for so many reasons. The tension in this game is second to none. It reminds me a lot of playing War of the Ring. Both sides just feel like they're on the edge of catastrophe with every single card play, every single action, every single die roll, the entire game. It's stressful in that regard, but it's also incredibly amazing, like, tension between the Barbarian and Roman player. Highs, lows, dramatic changes of fortune. Part of that is driven by the cards. The cards are extremely well designed. They are very interesting. Each card is pretty much unique and does something really impactful to the game whenever you use it on the event side. And so there's this constant energy of power that you get when you play a card that does something amazing. And these cards are like really game breaking for both sides. So like when you draw a hand of cards and you haven't seen what's in the deck before, you start looking through there and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe the game's allowing me to do that. Or, oh my God, I can't believe that there would be a card this powerful. And in that way, it reminds me a lot actually of Wellington, the Napoleonic 4-player game about the Peninsular War, because every card in that game felt really powerful. And in this game, both sides' cards just feel so, like, every time you play something, you feel like you're doing something cool. And that's such an accomplishment for a game that feels this balanced. Maybe a little bit pro-Barbarian, because after all, we are talking about the fall of the Western Roman Empire from the 4th and 5th centuries. But that said, my Roman opponent played it really well. As you can see, I actually didn't even really crack the limes along the Rhine or along the Danube. All of that stayed pretty much intact. I did get a couple barbarian tribes kind of up to the border, put some pressure on. But for the most part, the barbarians that I was playing kind of squeaked through in a couple places. They squeaked through and expanded really quickly. And so it really like makes you feel like you're trying to plug the hole in the dam or the submarine. I can't even begin to tell you, like the action economy is super tight. The events are very thematic and interesting. There's a lot of strategy involved. Once you start to know the decks better, you'll be able to play the game better. This is going to make an excellent tournament game, especially because there's scenarios. You can just do the 3 to 7 turn scenario, or you can do sort of the turn 5 to 9 scenario, I think it is, and just play parts of this. But as you get to know the decks in this game, you're going to be able to play and counterplay each other really interesting ways, just because all the cards are so powerful. And so you're going to want to try and draw out the ones that are going to be less effective for your opponent at any given moment in the game. Let me see if I can take you through what happened from a narrative perspective. So first of all, the game started on turn A with the Constantine the Great dying, essentially, and his 2 sons fighting in a Roman civil war. Now, as the barbarian player, you have a few barbarians on the board. You've got the Picts up in Scotland, and I believe you have one tribe in Germania, and I forget which one it is. But you're not really, and you have some units, some barbarian units in Germania, but you're not really doing very much at that point with the barbarians. What's interesting is the maps essentially start split in half. You've got one of Constantine's sons here in Gaul and Hispania and I believe Africa, and then the other son here in the east, along with control of Rome and Italy. And as the barbarian player, you're playing the usurper side, the gray side, which you can see there's a stack of usurpers right here. That's actually Stilicho here at the end of the game, who didn't come in until very late. Basically, the Roman player, the loyalist Roman player, chooses which son they want to be. Either they stick with the western son or the eastern son. My opponent chose to stay with the west. And then the barbarian player gets to play with all of the eastern units, who are sort of the usurper powers. And so you go back and forth. You have Romans fighting Romans for the first couple of turns. Some new barbarians start to populate on the fringes of the empire, but no one's paying attention to that. Everyone's paying attention to what's going on here. And as the barbarian player, really, what you're trying to do is trying to take away some control of provinces so that he doesn't get as many victory points, and you're trying to essentially bleed the Roman army, because by the time turns A and B are over, which is the prelude to the game, then you're in the real shit. Then it's all about barbarians, and the barbarian deck just takes off. You get so many invasion cards. I think in the first turn we dropped the Franks, the Alemanni, and the Franks, Alemanni, and I believe it was the Jutes. Yeah, the Jutes. And so we had a lot of barbarian tribes up in here pushing down against the Romans. He did a really good job boxing me in. We had a battle with the Picts and the Romans that could have gone very good for the barbarians, but they just rolled really poorly. And so we were kind of at a stalemate in Britain. You know, we had a little bit of a minor incursion happening here just outside of Scotland, but Britain was pretty much in Roman hands pretty early in the game. There was not a lot of progress the barbarians were making. There were some raids out of Africa that came up into Spain. In fact, this I think was from turn 2. These control markers, they were on the board for most of the game. We had some raiding into Africa. We had a usurper emperor pop up in Hispania, I believe it was. He was put down. It's really fun when you're playing the barbarians because you get these cards that allow you to gain control of the Roman player's generals if they're in certain locations. And so as the Roman player, you're trying to like hide your good generals like behind the emperor so that they can't be targeted, or put them in Italy so they can't be targeted. It's a really cool game of cat and mouse. As we got into sort of like the early third of sort of the barbarian era of the game, you know, there were some skirmishes along the border. The barbarians were pressing down. I believe I was able to get the Alemanni through, and then they were resettled. The Romans decided that they were going to resettle the Alemanni in Sirmium, in Illyricum, and so that took away one of my armies and gave them to the Roman player. But of course, then the barbarians controlled Illyricum, and what's interesting about this game is that when you have settled barbarian tribes and allied them to you, normally your hand size is 7, but when you have barbarian tribes, when you draw your hand, you first have to put a card face down in the tribal reserve for every barbarian tribe that you've allied, and you don't get to look at them, and you can only use those cards for actions with your barbarian allies. And so you're just kind of, you're not really fully in control of what they can do, and so your actual hand size goes down. You can see at one point here, he actually baptized the barbarian. So what this card does is it counts as one of the ones you have to put in here, and you can use it every turn, which is pretty cool. And so, yeah, so the first third of the game, I felt like the barbarians were behind. He was hovering around 10 victory points. You know, there was some raiding going on, but not a lot. I think most of the action in the early part of the game was in Britain, and that's where the Picts managed to come down into Aboricum a little bit, but they really broke through on the western side of Britannia, and that's when the Jutes decided to sail from Denmark, and they sailed to Britain and landed here in, I believe they landed here in Porta Adurni. And then the pressure was on because he had just, right after I did that, he had moved his general in Londinium across because he needed the backup because I had a lot of barbarians here trying to break through with the Franks and so forth. And that kind of led to the collapse of Britain. I managed to gain control away of the province by taking away control of a majority of the territories. He still had Londinium, but he didn't have a leader there. And without a leader, you can't actually control it. So he decided to give up Britannia with the card that basically puts a barbarian allies. He puts the Britons in charge, and he gets out. And that was sort of the beginning of the crumble, was in Britain, like it would be historically. After that, I managed to sort of exploit a gap here and get through, and I managed to conquer Augusta Treverorum, which, by the way, I think with the Franks, actually, which is, by the way, if you've ever read the book Eagle in the Snow, it's about this particular part of the collapse here. Eventually, we did manage to get to Durocatorum and take that away. And from there, as you can see, the barbarians spread all throughout Gaul. We got Attila in the game pretty late. Attila came in. He managed to come down here. The Romans held him back, and then he kind of made a U-turn and went around. But he absolutely decimated some of these cities. He decimated some Roman armies. He's the barbarians' best leader, of course. And he was just a hammer, really, to bring down. While he was doing that, we had what was this? This is, I forget which tribe this is. This is Stilicho, the Pretender. We had another tribe down here. Anyways, we managed to take over most of Gaul. We finally finished conquering London from the Britons there. And then we actually managed to get Illyricum as well. We managed to get the Alemanni down, or the Saxons maybe, I can't remember, down into Illyricum and do some raiding and really drive a wedge there. And so the Roman Empire was kind of collapsing from all sides. He had Italy, he had Spain, Africa was kind of a back and forth, but then he managed to settle some barbarians in Africa, and that pretty much locked that down. And then in the final few turns of the game, you know, there's some really interesting cards that if there's any pretender emperors, so like, you know, Stilicho here is a pretender, you're losing victory points for them unless you can either kill them or accept their claim to the throne. Really fascinating mechanic where the Roman player can decide to give up his loyalist troop forces for the usurper forces if it ever gets to that point. And so as the barbarian player, you're trying to balance how well you're doing so that you don't go too far in one direction that the Roman player wants to take advantage of the progress you've made with the pretenders. Some really cool stuff there. And ultimately, victory points in this game are decided by control of provinces. So it's very similar to like Hannibal, for example, and there's a tracker here. But basically, 7 is sort of the middle mark. If the Roman player has 7 provinces, there's no VP change. Less than 7, you lose a point for every province. Less than 7, you don't have. And above 7, you gain a point for every province that you control. And so as the Barbarians, you're really trying to take away control of these provinces so that the victory points start ticking away. In the full campaign scenario, the Romans start with 12 victory points. And the game actually finished at -2 on the final turn. It actually came down to the final turn. He was at 2 in the final turn. I managed to get some final raiding off down in Gaul. That crossed the line. So when you plunder in this game, when you raid, it's kind of like a Sword of Rome. So you click up this track with the plunder marker here. Every space that you plunder gives you 1. Now, every time you do 10, victory points go down by 1. So I managed to cross over into a tens digit on the final turn. That knocked it down to 2. He was losing, what did he have at the end? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He was losing 2 more points because of provincial control. He basically lost all of Gaul. And then because there was a pretender here with Stilicho, which I played on the final turn, he brought him out actually on the final turn with the card. And then the very next turn, I managed to switch him to my side. And so because of that, because we had the Imperial succession fights, he lost another point for that. So he just couldn't come back from where he was at in the position. He held most of Italy. As you can see, like the Alps and some of the stuff on the coastal road here had come under barbarian control. And a lot of these troops along the Limes had bypassed basically and isolated. But such an epic game. I mean, I would say the closest feel, maybe not mechanically, but certainly from a tension standpoint, like I said, War of the Ring, but also Paths of Glory. You always want to do more than you can possibly do with your cards. And every card is such a decision, like I said, because the cards are so powerful. You really struggle when you have to pitch one to do ops points to activate your leaders and do raiding and stuff like that. And there's like every decision, it feels very important. And that's the sign of a really great design. This is by far probably the best game I have played so far this year through the first half or so of 2022. Definitely going to be on my top 10 at the end of the year. If you love Rome, specifically like Imperial Rome and the fall of Imperial Rome, this game will give you that entire 150, 200 years in a day, basically. We were able to play through the 9 turns in about 8 hours. That was our first playthrough. So with repeated plays, you could probably get that down to about 6. So, you're talking about a good, solid game day. And both sides play so differently. Both sides have sort of like different things that they can do. The Roman leadership is really powerful. So even though they have smaller forces, there's not as many of them, they can still win when they're outnumbered, which makes attacking with them and attacking with the barbarians kind of dangerous. The Romans actually have a native when they're defending or attacking across roads. They have a native +1 to their dice in general. And there's a card in the Barbarian deck that comes out late game that actually takes that away. Let's see if I can get this to focus. So yeah, Roman discipline falters, right? The quality of Roman troops starts to go down. For the rest of the game, ignore combat superiority, and the Barbarian player wins all tied battles. So that actually helped me out quite a bit at the end, especially with Attila running around sort of in the middle of the continent. But just a fantastic game. Amazing production as well. The cards are great. The counters are great. The map is fantastic. As you can see, it's very playable. I think if there's one criticism that I would have of the game, is that the rule book, while good in that it covers everything, it's a very bad reference. So like when you're trying to find a specific rule stuff, I think they could have done a better job organizing the case format of the rules, because there's stuff that's like in sections where you wouldn't expect to find it, and it's really hard to find when you're trying to look for specific things. And there are a lot of tiny rules in this game with exceptions about certain things. And so it will take probably a play or two to really get that down in your head. And so it's really hard to search the rule book for those things when you're wondering, hey, what does this mean? What does this mean? Or what do I do in this situation? But otherwise, just from a theme perspective, from a gameplay perspective, absolutely fantastic. I love this game so much. It's one of those games now I think that I will play at any time if someone asks me to. There's just so much going on. There's so many sort of paths to agency in the board, and both sides are sort of like at each other's throats the whole time. So that's Barbarians at the Gates. Just wanted to do this quick after action report because we just finished up a full day of gaming, and my Barbarians, won in the end.